lot of you getting to be very familiar with his, I don't know if that's too bad. I hope I was no test afterwards to remember everybody's name, but I've been involved with water a long time because I'm a farmer maybe, but I guess when I first started farming, I had a neighbor who was on the groundwater conservation board, and he wanted off the board. He suckered me into running for that board, and that's where it kind of started back in the 70s. So I remember the Hamilton County Groundwater Conservation District, which was in a part of the Blue River Groundwater Conservation District. And so we were dealing with water runoff issues back then. You know, nowadays you won't find a drop of water in a ditch. Anyways, things have changed. It's been a quite a dramatic change, and it's for numerous reasons that we can all go into, but I think most of it's for the best. We learn more. We're doing a better job farming than we have ever done. We've gotten more efficient with water, and I still think we have a long ways to go. We're not done. I'll just head off down the list a little bit. Starting this next session, we have 22 carryover bills that are there. Some of them. From what I'm told, and being a freshman, it used to be in the old days that they actually killed things around the Capitol. If there was a bad bill, you IPP'd it and it was gone. Well, we're a kinder, gentler legislature now. We leave things lay there, and I'm kind of like a guy that gets rid of it. So we'll see how things continue in the future, but. You always find out that nothing is ever really dead. There's very few new ideas. We can go on and on. A couple of the bills that I'll just talk about shortly, and we can address any others during the question time. But Senator Kolowski has a bill that allows the NRDs to do bonding. I'm okay with it in some respects, but the one point that I insist on it being in there is that I will allow the NRDs the authority to bond if it's part of a project that's part of the Water Sustainability Fund. So if you apply for a grant from the Water Sustainability Fund and you have a big project, you would qualify for bonding authority in order to complete that project. If you're not part of that project, no bonding authority. Typically in the past, when I was on the Upper Big Blue, we did some fairly large projects, and projects like that usually take 3 to 4 or 5 years to complete. If you do a lot of planning, you can work this out in your regular budget. There really isn't a need for bonding. Papio is a little different situation with what they're doing. They've been given bonding authority in the past, but I think it's due to expire in the near future. So I don't know if there's something that will work out that just looks at what their situation is, or if they will agree to finally include what I'm asking for. And like I guess I should preface all my comments. These are the direct comments of Chairman Chills. Don't worry about saying it. I'm kind of standing in for Chairman Chills, so these comments are all my own. But so far, I think that's the only way I can support the bill, and so we'll see where it goes. I thought we kind of had things worked out, and it didn't look that way. So. LE 404, which is Senator Davis's bill, and that's kind of on the hearing on a water right. I think it gives a little bit more statutory presence for some other users in there, which is I think it's a good thing. When we're talking, ever since we talked about conjunctive use, whether it's a surface water right or whatever, we're always talking about now surface water and how that may impact groundwater. So I think everybody has the standing at least to at least voice their opinion on whether that water right should be granted or not. I don't have a problem with that. You look in the past, and I think I would have to say that in years past at DNR, a lot of times there were a lot more surface water rights granted than what should have been, and I think those days are probably over. But to have more people offer evidence and testimony at those hearings, I don't think there's a problem with that. It's a very short process, yet the way it looks like to me, so I'm in favor of doing that. LB 127, which is Senator Chambers' bill, dealing with mountain lions. And I know it doesn't really have anything to do with water, but it could. If Senator Chambers suddenly has an urge to deal with mountain lions, it could impact a lot of legislation. So from that standpoint, I will say it's one of those bills that could have a pretty good impact on what the Natural Resources Committee gets done. I just say that's one of those bills that should be gone. This summer we had 3 interim studies that were conducted, and the first one that I'll talk about is LR 154, and that was Senator Stitter's bill dealing with oil and gas injection wells. I didn't know anything about oil and gas. I toured some oil wells in the past when I was on the NRD, so I kind of knew the process of what happens out in western Nebraska, but I did not know that there were licensed injection wells, or commercial licensed injection wells, storage. So I learned a lot during our hearings, and the first hearing we held last winter in the Capitol, a lot of people, the way our process is set up, you get the people that are proponents, and then the opponents, and then the neutral. And so everybody comes and everybody was testifying that we should, really put the clamps on the Oil and Gas Commission and how we deal with that. And then as the opposition testified, well, then the neutral capacity, finally the engineering people and the technical people and somebody from the Oil and Gas Commission testified. And that just kind of cleared everything up. I mean, we looked at that, and I think it's a good process. There's a few things we need to look at yet as far as, from this is my perspective, maybe some parts of the oversight of groundwater quality. But you got NRDs in the area that are already monitoring groundwater quality, so I don't think it's a big issue. I don't feel as though we should put a lot more requirements on as far as drilling more, monitoring wells, and those types of things, because sometimes we just add a lot more cost and we don't prove anything. So I just think we need to probably look at the impact of the different, who oversees what. I know the EPA cedes some authority to the DEQ, and DEQ passes on to the Oil and Gas Commission. But we'll look at those types of things, but otherwise I think the Oil and Gas Commission has done a good job. There were a lot of complaints about their hearing process, and part of that, not knowing how they operate, it kind of, at first seemed to me a little strange. But when they do their hearings, they're more of a technical nature. They're not so much for public comment or just anybody who wants to make a comment. They're looking at the technical aspects of that license. So it is more of a judicial type hearing, where they're looking at more facts instead of just the emotions of people coming in to testify. And so that's why it was kind of limited in its scope. Senator Har, he wanted to eliminate the Oil and Gas Commission, so I don't think that's going anywhere, but we don't need to spend a lot of time on that one. LR 272 dealt with the Niobrara River Council, and there too, we talked a lot about that last year. We had hearings on it. I didn't learn anything new during the summer. There's some things that are going to have to be worked out. I think they'll get that done. The next one we had was 323, which dealt with import. I went and toured the project. It's kind of a neat project for what it did. Being on the NRD board previously and also serving on LD 962 task force, whenever we're talking about diverting water to another basin, it gets me a little leery. I know it helped solve the problem with Kansas on the Republican Basin. But anytime we start diverting water from one basin to another basin to solve their water problems, we're going to run into trouble. That would be like at the Upper Big Blue. You'd say, well, we just keep developing, we keep pumping, and if we run into trouble, we'll take excess flows off the Platte and we'll fix our problem. That's not how it works. I've always been pretty adamant that in the Upper Big Blue, at least, if we have a problem, we'll fix that problem. We're not going to look to anybody else to fix it. I don't want to look to the state to fix it. We'll fix it through the application process. And I'm also a real strong believer in no moratoriums. Groundwater was share and share alike. And I've had neighbors who, I'm probably 99% irrigated. I've got neighbors who have chosen not to drill a well, and so there'll be an 80-acre patch in my country there that's not irrigated. And I'll get people that are fully irrigated like me, they'll come up and say, well, we should put a moratorium on. And I'll say, well, The neighbor over here, he hasn't irrigated, he really didn't cause the problem, so why don't we dry up your 80 for the next 50 years, and we'll let him pump water. He didn't cause this problem. Why should we put a moratorium on it? And so at that point, they usually back off and think a little bit. And I think we can solve it through other methods. I mean, in the end, if we have to do something to regulate water use in the Upper Bay Blue, I hope they keep lowering that allocation until I decide which piece to dry up. I may have to. I may have to choose some acres that I don't irrigate, and it'll be my worst acres, and that's how it should be done. There's some prime pieces of ground that are not irrigated yet. I still think they should have the opportunity to do it. So I'm not a big fan of moratoriums in some areas, but that's the beauty of the NRD system. Each area is kind of different. How they deal with their groundwater, okay with me. Everybody decides their own path, and it's a local decision, and that's the way it should be. Groundwater is a very precious resource. Our groundwater levels have gone up and down, and we think we're sustainable, but we don't know what the future holds. The weather forecasters can't predict weather Friday, so I don't go much by predictions, but there isn't a lot of history in the scheme of time, so it's hard to, we could go into a 5-year drought next year. Granted, I agree, but we should plan as best we can, be ready for it, and deal with it accordingly. And I think each NRD has done a really good job of doing it. Yes, we have all probably, one time or another, one group or another has not been as progressive as they wanted to be, but there's also political reasons for not doing some things. So those are, the NCORP project, to me, I realize that it did benefit the state. I don't doubt that. It helps with Kansas solve the problem, but long term, I don't think it's sustainable. And we need to look at that model for any other problems that are out there. It's a tough subject, and I've heard both sides of it. It's not an easy one, and I hope, as I learn more about some of the credits and things like that, maybe my perspective will change, but that's the overall feeling I get from NCORP. That, I just want to say, I give credit to everybody for coming up with a solution at the time. Whether it's right or wrong, whether I agree with it or not, everybody did a lot of work there. They got something done. They did come up with a solution. Water Sustainability Fund. When I was on LB 962, we kept asking for funding. That was our biggest hang-up. Every time we had a committee that was supposed to deal with the funding portion of 962 and how we implemented it, that committee would come back with a recommendation, and they always said, well, let's put it on sales tax. And Senator Schock would say, yeah, not going to happen. So we'd send it back to the committee, they'd come back, they'd talk about all the options, they'd come back to sales tax. And we did that for 18 months, I think. And I remember very specifically at the end when all of us had to agree that LB 962 was what we wanted, and it was supposed to be unanimous consent. And I remember there was one person who said, he didn't really want to support it yet because we hadn't provided funding. So it's taken a lot of years since that's passed, but finally Nebraska's putting some money in water. Now, if you look at what other states have done, they have provided tremendous amounts of money for water issues. Colorado, Wyoming, they've all spent tremendous amounts of water. Nebraska has not done anything in the past. All of our surface water projects were either federal projects or whatever. But Nebraska has never, as a state, really put a lot of money into water. And I will say, all the groundwater development was done with private resources. There was no money involved to help promote irrigation, groundwater irrigation. That was all done with private funds, and in return we got slapped with higher property taxes, and we raised our yields. Yes, we stimulated the economy of a huge portion of Nebraska, and we did it on our own. And so I think it's about time that the state took some money into water. I really do. And I've always said that the Water Sustainability Fund, the most important thing they do is these first projects they choose. And I was at the hearing on the regulations, and when this got passed, Senator Carlson was always talking about water. Water is the lifeblood of Nebraska. Without water, there's no life. And suddenly, I get the feeling that it's turned into, now suddenly it's clean water. Without clean water, we don't have it. And I'm gonna just say that, no, we have to be a sustainable water supply. If we don't have any water at all, we can't clean it, we can't do anything with it. So to me, it's still strictly, it should be dealing with quantity, not quality. We've got other programs, NRDs are dealing with water quality issues all over the place. The Water Sustainability Fund, I don't think should be used for water quality. It was set up, we were in the middle of a drought, we were talking water shortages, and that's what that fund was set up for. I hope it sticks to those principles. I think it's important. I mean, there's a lot of communities that get to deal with water quality issues, and they've done it. They've done it on their own. City of Henderson, where I was at, they had to drill some new wells. And what I really find interesting is all the communities around that I know of, their solution to it is to go out in the middle of our ag farmland and drill their wells out in the country. That's where they find clean water. And I will admit there is point source pollution from farming. But there's other issues at play because it seems like every city in the NRD, Upper Big Blue, at least has a plume right around the municipality. So when we talk about solving those issues, I don't think the Water Sustainability Fund is where that belongs. I think that's a separate issue and shouldn't be a part of that. But we'll see once. I think it's going to be real important if those projects that are chosen the first time around, that's when down the road the state will decide how much money to put in the programs. We all know budget times, good times go and come and go. And I think in the near future here, we've already seen one revenue forecast coming a little short. I think that pattern will continue for another year or two, and hopefully our down cycles in ag will be shorter than they've been in the past, and we can see a turnaround in a couple of years. But I think it's real important that we are wise stewards of that money, and that we do a good job of spending it, and those first projects are something that the public looks at and says, wow, that's a cool project, that's something that we should be doing, it's going to provide long-term water use for the state. To me, it's extremely important. And right now, we're going to have, I think by the time funds probably come out, we should have around $30 million in that fund, which is it's a pretty substantial amount. It's not, and I think if we can just sustain that year in and year out, it's some sort of level. Back when 962, I always thought we were talking about 11 million, 9 to 11 million later. But then there was always going to be cost share. We're at 60-40 now. Back then we did talk about what the cost share might be, but we always thought the locals should have skin in the game. And I still agree with that. I think it is important for the locals to always put some money into that. The next big, I guess, topic probably would be the Spencer Dam. One thing about the Upper Big Blue and John Turnbull is that us board members were well versed on almost every project in the state. Surface water, groundwater, it didn't matter. We at least knew something about it, maybe just enough to be dangerous, but we talked a lot about Spencer Dam and those types of issues. I think this is it's a good agreement. The Spencer Dam for a long time wasn't used, and I personally might say that, I think too much money traded hands here, but parties got together, reached an agreement, and I think it's a good agreement for that area and for the state. It does change a few little things, but I mean, when we look at, my basin is, I can look at it as a pretty simple basin. We don't really impact any river except the Blue. It's not anywhere near over-appropriated yet. We seem to be in pretty good shape. And suddenly you get to the Platte River, and that is going to be a huge issue. I've always said the Republican Basin, I think, is an issue that can be solved. It's going to take some time, some effort, but it is fixable. The Platte Basin, I don't know if we'll ever fix that. With fish and wildlife and endangered species, there will be no end to the Platte River Basin, and therefore any river that runs into it is tied into it, and it's a big issue. And so anytime you talk about the Niagara River Loop, and you go up in that area, and they have plenty of water flowing. That's not the issue. The issue will be the Platte and the impact it has on it. And when you have Omaha and Lincoln downstream, you have a big problem. And so I like the agreement. I'll learn more about it. I obviously have not, I've scanned through it, I've read parts of it. I've not read it all yet. There's some things I have questions on, and I think Lori, Senator Shields will have some questions on it too. And so I think it's something we're going to be looking at, but the overall principle of it, I like. There's parties that got together, they reached an agreement that solved the problem. So I don't know if I even, I'm sure there might be questions if you guys want to, deal with it. That I'm, you're talking about some pretty good flows, and the Spencer Dam it's an old project. It's been around forever. I'll make note here that Senator Shields did indicate that he supports the overall project, the western stream flows, and so but I think there's going to be lots of questions, and he does want anybody, he encourages everybody with questions or comments or anything to contact his office. Let's work through some of this now before we get the session started. Let's figure out what we can do to make this better, and maybe get it right the first time. Let's fix it before it gets to the floor, so to speak. And I do think it's a good project. With that, I guess I just open it up to questions.